I would guess that most of you have probably already seen this news, but just in case you haven't, Lumix has some new firmware coming. They announced yesterday, but it's available now, firmware for the new S1R Mark II, the S1 Mark II, the S1 Mark IIe. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind-the-scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. Starting with the S1R Mark II, we finally have the full 8K open gate 3x2, which I've talked recently about. Open gate, it's not all created the same. 3x2 open gate, a little bit different than 4x3 open gate. You may want to understand the differences there depending on how you're using open gate, but it is cool to see we get the full unlocked specs from that S1R Mark II, full 8K as well as the 7.2K open gate modes with some raw recording as well, in case that's an option you like to, if you're doing it that way externally via HDMI. We've also got the ARRI LogC3 profile, and this is where it gets a little tricky or maybe slightly confusing. It's not that confusing, but the firmware is free, but the ARRI profile is not. You have to pay for that. So even though the firmware, which is available right now, you can go download it and install it, that part's free. If you want the ARRI LogC3 color profile, you got to go buy that separately, which I don't know if I would do. I would really need to see the benefits of shooting that way compared to Vlog. Every Lumix camera I have and use shoots Vlog, and that's how I've been doing it. You can play around with different conversion tables, and if you're using DaVinci Resolve, that obviously has either the CST, the color exchange, CVT, whatever they're called. You know what I'm talking about, where you convert one profile to another. I don't know if you need to shoot in ARRI LogC, but maybe there's some small benefit there in terms of simplicity or workflow if you're shooting with ARRI cameras already. What this means to me, what I think the greater outlook on this whole thing is that Panasonic is working with ARRI. I think that's incredibly cool. And if there's this one small step in a direction of more integration between those two systems, if you have ARRI at the highest of the high-end cinema and Lumix is on that path, one of those stepping stones, maybe there's some cool things we'll see later down the road, depending on how all this color stuff goes. Great to see and hear that they're working together. Nikon bought up Red. Canon has their cinema line. Sony has their full lineup from Alpha all the way to their cinema stuff. So lots of cool stuff happening, and it's nice to see that Panasonic is working with ARRI. I don't know if that's exclusive or not. We'll see how it unfolds, but it's nice to see. We've also got some improved shooting assistance tools. You can read through all this, but basically that urban sports autofocus recognition mode is being added. You've also got some frame aspect ratio markers. So beyond just the standard frame markers, which I use all the time. If I'm shooting open gate on a Lumix camera, I'm using some kind of frame marker, either 16:9, 9:16, just so I know my framing beyond my full open gate. And it works remarkably well. This is one of my favorite features on the Lumix cameras, that you can just turn these on and they're completely responsive. As you switch to 4K, the 16:9 adjusts. If you go to open gate, it also adjusts. It's all very responsive, very intuitive, and there's not like, you don't have to program it in or do anything special. It just kind of works. And it's nice that it works on the small LCD display, but also if you display your info over HDMI. So that way, if you're shooting open gate, you can really see all your different crop marks right from the camera. No special software or monitoring needed. No special hardware. And now they're adding more of those frame markers. So you can have 2 or 3, or I think 3 is the maximum, but more options. And I think there's even a way to customize exactly which aspect ratio you want. So let's say you were doing some kind of specialty billboard advertisement type thing. You really want to know where your crop lines are, you can dial that in. Very, very helpful. We've also got some expanded workflow capabilities. So direct transfer from the CF Express Type B or SD memory card to an external SSD can be made. We've got recording proxy files to the internal memory card during HDMI raw video data output. We're getting into some of the nitty gritty stuff that maybe only applies to a handful of you out there, but it is interesting. You can read through this. We've also got some enhanced customization you can see there. And then in addition to the S1R Mark II, we've got the S1 Mark II, S1 Mark IIe. The firmware upgrades, obviously we're not getting 8K out of either of those cameras, with those sensors. It's not as much resolution as on the R variant, but we do get the same ARRI LogC3 profile. We've also got those frame aspect ratio markers, and you can change the AF, the autofocus frame color. So instead of just the white box, you can change up to 10 different colors for that. We've got this focus stacking function, so you can do focus stacking for your macro shots right in the camera, which is very nice. I know there's some people that I'm thinking of that use Sony cameras for that particular feature. I think some of the Sony cameras can do it, if I'm going from memory. Not a thing that I do a lot, but certainly helpful if that's something you're into, macro photography. And then also kind of a cool, helpful thing, this wireless transmission for Capture One. If you're shooting tethered, which I don't know how tethered you are if you're wireless, but let's still you talk that way. Tethered to Capture One, you can now do it over Wi-Fi, which is very helpful if you're that type of person that's in a studio constantly shooting direct to Capture One. You're, kind of bypassing the whole going to the memory card, copying and transferring it later. You can shoot tethered, untethered, kind of neat and notable. Also, some other stuff here, little notes, compatible models, some, all your disclaimers down here at the bottom. But you can read through this if you want. I think it's really nice to see. Of course, this is free, aside from that ARRI profile, which, they want to make their money too. So there's the paid component for the color profile, which a lot of you are probably excited for, but just on the other side of that, making good on the promises, like when the S1R Mark II was announced, released, hey, 8K is coming, we don't know when, and I should say 8K open gate, that's coming, we don't know when. Now we know, it's available. You can go download it right now. And I don't have much more to say about this other than it's nice to see firmware continuing to kind of drip out for these new cameras. There's nothing here that really gets me super excited. I think all these new cameras kind of do that on their own. From the factory, out of the box, they're really powerful, really incredible devices. I would love to see ongoing firmware support for older cameras like the S5 Mark II and the S9. No indication whether that's coming or not. The S5 II was well supported for quite some time, but now it seems like the S1 lineup is getting the most priority. Now, one thing that's missing is the S1H, which I've also talked a lot about, and there's some speculation back and forth if or when this is even going to come. I do think it is going to come. When you look and you go back, you can go back, roll back the clock to the initial S1 announcement, the first announcement, not all these new ones, not the Mark II variants, but the originals back in, I think, 2018, 2019, around that timeline. It was the S1, the S1R, and the S1H came later in the fall. You can go check the dates on it. I don't have them directly in front of me, but I did look it up the other day. I'm like, what was the original S1 launch like? How did that go? And it was the S1, the S1R, and the S1H came later in the fall. I don't know if that's going to happen with the S1H Mark II. I'm crossing my fingers, hoping that that's true, that we do eventually get to see this camera and what it would have to offer. But what's even cooler, and I'll probably make a whole separate video about this, is that the S1 Mark II, by all accounts, is selling quite well. If you try and get it anywhere now, Amazon, B&H, even on the Panasonic Lumix website, you can't order an S1H2. Well, I should take that back. You can order it, but it's back ordered, and the expected shipping time, I think right now, is around like 15 days or something for the restock. But even that is, restocking the people who are already in line. Both the S1 Mark II and the new 24-60 have sold out everywhere I've looked. You can maybe find one or two, third-party reseller, eBay type things. A lot of them are quite a bit more expensive than they are retail. So if you're in that position where you're looking for an S1 Mark II, you're looking to get a 24-60, that new lens they announced, you may have to wait just a little bit longer unless you are on that back order list. It's unfortunate, but also a good thing for Lumix or Panasonic, depending on how you want to look at it, that this camera and this lens is selling quite well. I don't have the actual facts and figures in front of me. Obviously, I don't have insight into that, but it feels different than other Lumix launches. Seems like there's a lot more buzz, there's a lot more excitement, there's a lot of hype around this camera, the S1 Mark II, which is kind of on the expensive side, upwards of $3,000. But it seems like the S5 Mark II was kind of this sleeper camera for the longest time. People caught on, hey, it's got phase detect, hey, it's great, it's the Lumix stabilization, it's got open gate, it's full frame, it's all the things you know and love. And that caught a lot of trajectory and a lot of enthusiasm in the S5 Mark II, but that's like long tail, just people picking it up over time. Obviously, it's a great price. Still probably like top valued camera in terms of what you're paying versus what you're getting. You get so much value out of an S5 Mark II. And oddly enough, the S5 Mark II used prices have also risen a little bit. Chalk it up to whatever you want, tariffs or inflation or I don't know, whatever. All I can tell you is that the used price in the S5 Mark II does seem to be a little bit higher than it used to be. I want to say for me, whenever I was looking, $1,300 was kind of the lowest I ever saw in an S5 Mark II, and they kind of sat there for a little bit, and now it seems like $1,500 US is the new baseline, and it even creeps up a little higher than that depending on where you're looking. So needless to say, the S5 Mark II still selling quite well, even on the used market, and the S1 Mark II and that new 24-60 also seem to be hot sellers right now. So I imagine there's a lot of you out there who are going to get these cameras, get this lens, and there's going to be a lot of people out there using it. What I really am excited to see is how it performs. The S1 Mark II specifically. The S1 Mark IIe, I know there's a handful of people out there who that's their kind of favorite camera. It's that bridge between the S5 Mark II and the S1 Mark II. It's a I don't know. For me, I would just pay the full price to get the S1 Mark II if I really had to. Like pay for the extra features. It's like the Band-Aid. You just rip it off once and it only hurts that one time to pay the little bit extra, but then you're never regretting it in the long run of, oh, I don't have this. Oh, I don't have that. I know there's a few of you out there that want the S1 Mark IIe, but for me, the S1 Mark II is kind of where I'm looking. And I want to see, does it perform as well as all the reviews initially said? And is it plagued by the dreaded, the cursed, the problem of all problems, overheating? It is my nightmare. It is the thing that drives me most insane about any of these new cameras from any company is overheating, especially when you're buying a tool, you're paying lots of money, and it needs to be reliable. And yes, there's plenty of you out there. You're shooting in a studio, you have air conditioning, it's a controlled environment, but there's just as many of you. And I guarantee almost everybody at some point in time is going to take their camera outside into the sun, into the, the weather conditions of your area. And if it's summertime and it's a little bit warm and you want to film, I want a camera that can do that job. The S5 Mark II can do it. It can handle it. Even in the hottest, craziest places like where I'm at, it's not the hottest, but it's pretty close, pretty consistent. Arizona, Phoenix, it gets quite hot here in the summer, especially if you're filming outdoors, and the S5 Mark II can handle it. I promise you, the S5 Mark II can do it, but it remains to be seen. I don't know if I have that faith yet in the S1 Mark II. There's mixed reviews. The CF Express Type B cards do get hotter, and there's a lot of people saying that those cards in particular cause the camera to heat up. If you imagine CF Express Type B card, if it's getting hot and it's inside the camera itself is going to, take some kind of that thermal impact. The S5 Mark II is SD cards only. And I've never really ran into a scenario where those have really gotten hot on me. But on the GH7, shooting with CF Express Type B cards, I've popped those out and they've been quite warm. So if we're experiencing a similar thing on the S1 Mark II, if it doesn't have enough of that thermal management, like we're always talking about, the GH7 has it. Plenty of vents and fans and exhaust ports on the GH7. It can also handle the Phoenix summer. I don't know yet about the S1 Mark II. And it's probably one of those things I have to test for myself because I don't know that I'll ever fully, truly trust anyone on the internet, whether they're in a comment, on a forum, in a YouTube video. There's this weird thing about overheating tests where people will just kind of glance over it. Like, hey, I tested this, but I ran out of time. Oh, well, that's it. That's all you get. And I'm always left wondering, scratching my head, you tested one thing for like 30 minutes. Where's the rest? I need something a little bit more robust, a little real world shooting scenarios are obviously good. Stories, anecdotes, people saying, hey, here's what I did. I filmed all day. It was a wedding. It was a documentary, whatever. And here's how it worked. That's the kind of stuff I want to hear, but I honestly want to test it for myself. But I've talked far too long about stuff that's not firmware related, which was the whole point of this video. And firmware, it's nice. It's good to see Lumix rolling it out for free. I want to see more of this. More, just all the time. Wouldn't it be great if we got firmware just once a month? Hey, here's some new updates to get you excited about your camera. We fixed this, we tweaked that, optimized this. The other thing I've seen people point out, I think it was one person pointed out on the S1 Mark II that they thought the IBIS was a little aggressive, overly stable, kind of fighting with them as they were trying to shoot handheld. Another thing to look out for on the S1 Mark II. Maybe there's some tweaks or adjustments to that IBIS algorithm and how it's working in the camera. Nice thing about that is it should be easily addressed with firmware if it is even an issue at all. This one person was saying that the S5 Mark II and previous generations like the original S1H, this person thought stabilization was much better handled in those cameras than the new S1 Mark II. I don't know. We'll see. But another thing to keep an eye out for, if you are getting your hands on S1 Mark II, test the overheating, test the stabilization. Let us know the real nuts and the bolts of it. And I'll try and do the same if or when I get my hands on one.